Alrighty, so just gonna make a video for everyone so they can finish up their final PV projects. So we have a couple things that we need to talk about the financial part of your project. So off-grid and grid-tied people are gonna do something a little bit different from each other. So I thought I would first of all maybe walk through some old notes of mine about what type of costs you need to take into account when you're creating your spreadsheet for or your itemized budget, or I'm sorry, your itemized list of bill of materials, etc. So let me find where I'm at here. Okay. So one thing we're going to use, and you may have heard this term in your ethics class, is net present value. So the whole idea is, currency is worth more now than it will be in the future, right? And so we need to be able to have a way to compare our investment, meaning for those of you doing grid tied, you'll be comparing two different locations with two different incentive situations, whereas people doing off-grid are going to compare two different physical locations of your panels. Okay, so in order to compare those two investments, to basically tell the owner which one is better for them to install financially, we need to be able to compare them with a specific value, and that value is called net present value. Okay, so net present value is a single number. Basically tells you the quote-unquote goodness of various cash flows. Okay, so it takes into account inflation, and then we're going to give it a specific discount rate, and the discount rate is basically how much money is discounted over time. So I already gave you that in your assignment. And that calculation, we don't really need to know it. You just need to know why we're using net present value. But it's similar to your VOC calculations, which is an exponential multiplier type of calculation. Okay, so if you're making payments on something like a mortgage or whatever, your payments are worth less over time, right? So after we do this calculation, and I have a spreadsheet that we basically will fill out, then we'll have a specific number that is given as the net present value of these multiple cash flows. And a positive net present value, or NPV, is a good investment, meaning it returns at least what you put into what you initially invested. Okay, a negative NPV is a bad investment, meaning you're losing money. Okay, and zero NPV, it returns the discount rate, so you're just breaking even. Okay, so I'm going to skip through some stuff here. Your payback period is how long it takes for you to actually get your money back on the investment. So let's say you have a positive NPV. It's going to take X amount of years for you to start earning money on your investment. Okay, so let's skip down here. Okay, we don't need to talk about all of this stuff. I just want to touch on the things that you need to know. Okay, so you're going to have some incomes for your system. One type of income is incentives. Incentives are subsidized from the government, either state or federal, and that you're basically getting paid per kilowatt hour that you produce. Okay, so that can be like 13 cents a kilowatt hour or 5 cents a kilowatt hour, and that you get paid for anything you produce, even if you use it. Okay, and the incentive is there in order to encourage people to install solar. The whole idea was, if we subsidize this, then the solar industry will basically get legs enough to hopefully have the cost to install come down because you have more installations, and kind of like the Tesla model, they were really expensive in the beginning, but the more they produced them, the cost came down, right? So you have incentives. Then you have net metering. So net metering is kind of like a bank in which your house produces power, certain amount of energy, kilowatt hours. Okay, you pour that into the grid, and then let's say you use some of it, and then you have excess that you put back into the grid. You have a net that you know, quote unquote net energy that you put into the grid. That is kept track of by a two-way meter in your house. And then when, let's say, you want to use more energy than what you're producing, like let's say in the wintertime, you have basically that amount of electricity that you can pull back from the grid and have it basically for free. Okay, it's like pulling money out of a bank. Okay, so those are two main incomes, and then you have some costs that you're going to have to take into account. For example, repairs on your system, any kind of replacements. Okay, you'll probably have to replace your inverter after about 10 years. Okay, you're gonna, you know, if you're gonna do the maintenance and cleaning yourself, then maybe you don't have that kind of cost. But if you want to pay someone to come out and clean your panels, and you're gonna have some reoccurring cost, you may have insurance on it, and it's up to you how much you're gonna pay it insurance. You can make just some sort of estimate on that. Okay, so we're just gonna skip through here. So you can pay for your system in a couple different ways. You can pay just up front, out of pocket. You can get a loan, which is not tax deductible, a traditional loan, or you could get a home equity loan where your interest is tax deductible. Now, I believe in your project, I told you it was just a traditional loan and you're borrowing it all. Okay. Okay, we kind of switch back to net metering for a second, meaning you're using the grid as a bank. This is more of a cost avoidance. It's not really an income, it's a cost avoidance. You're kind of offsetting a cost. So this is not a taxable type of income. All right. Whereas production incentives are taxable, meaning they're a taxable income. You're getting paid for your power through the power company. Keep going here. Okay, so as far as off-grid, so I kind of was touching on grid tied because I was talking about tying to the grid. That's where you're going to get net metering, and that's where you're going to get your incentives. All right, so you have neither one of those for off-grid systems. Okay, so the whole question is, what does a good investment look like? Well, your net present value is basically always going to be negative. Sorry to say. You just don't have the income stream from your panels. Okay. Plus, it typically costs more because you have to buy a battery bank and you have to buy charge controllers, generator, etc. So what good looks like would be if you're comparing two systems like you are. You have one that's ground mount and one that's on the roof for your assignment. Then you are going to choose the one that has the least negative NPV. Okay, so the smaller negative NPV would be the better investment. All right, so just a side note as far as thinking about costs to your system. If you're doing off-grid, then you want to make sure you take into account yearly fuel cost, and that will go into an expense year over year. Okay, and you can come up with your fuel cost by figuring out how many hours you're going to run your generator a month. Okay, and then you'll multiply that. Then you'll get into the generator specs, and you'll see what like basically the consumption of your generator, how much fuel it would use per amount of time. Okay, and you can make that calculation to estimate how much fuel you're going to need to purchase. Okay, so skipping a lot of stuff. Okay, so you'll need to take into account any of your purchase components into your overall cost of your system. You want to take into account any labor and overhead. So if you're a solar installer, you'll have to pay for labor, and then there's the cost of doing business, which is overheads. You have to maintain buildings for your business, keep tools. It's anything that is not associated with a specific job number. So you can bake overhead into labor, okay, and you can just make some sort of assumption. Here's the thing. I'm not going to grade you necessarily on how accurate, like let's say your labor, you incorporate how accurate your labor cost is, but I will look at how thorough you are in thinking about the different costs you may run into, if that makes sense, right? If you're really thorough in thinking about all these different costs and you include something like that, then that's good, okay? As far as taxes and fees, you have permits, so building permit, and then you have some third-party charges like utility hookup fees, consumables, and then does your business want to make any profit? You may want to think about that too. Okay, so let's see here. Don't forget shipping. So you could do 10% shipping if you don't have a better shipping estimate. Okay. And then skip that. That's not true anymore. As far as other costs, so labor estimate, you could do 20% of materials. Okay, so purchased initial materials. If you do an off-grid system with a ground mount, which you will, for those of you doing off-grid, then your labor is going to be about 100% of your mount cost. Okay? It's a little bit more expensive your labor is a little bit more expensive because you have to lay concrete or you have to pour concrete, excuse me, and it's just a little bit more labor intensive to set that up, okay? Your sales tax will depend on the state you're in. Any kind of fees, so we talked about permits. Electrical permit in Washington is about $250. So you could just make that estimate. You don't need a building permit in Washington. You're not doing anything in Oregon. Oh, wait. Off-grid. I think off-grid gave you Oregon. Can't remember. Anyway, you have to do a building permit in Oregon, so $250 for the electrical, $250 for the building permit. When the power company comes in to give you a two-way meter for those of you who are doing grid tied, you don't need a two-way meter for off-grid, okay, because you're not tied to the grid, okay? So, but for those of you who are grid tied, power company needs to come in, do a two-way meter. That'll be about $400. Okay, so you need to include that. For off-grid ground mount, it'd be about, okay, you could say you're gonna have to pour your concrete yourselves to the owners, or you're gonna have to rent a truck, probably $500. Okay. Operation and maintenance, O&M. You're going to want to provide the customer just a kind of general, this is how you're going to take care of your system year over year. So you're going to have to instruct them you need to clean your panels, or maybe you have to clean your batteries if you're off-grid, etc. Okay, so for O&M for off-grid, clean the modules. You're going to need to replace your battery probably every 7 years. So you'll need to put that in your reoccurring cost. You'll need to replace your inverter every 10 years or so. You'll probably need to replace your generator, okay, maybe at 10 years. Okay, as far as the maintenance, you'll need to fill up your batteries if you're doing flooded batteries. You'll need to remember to equalize your batteries every once in a while, which, if you remember, that means it's on the charge controller settings, but you're basically increasing the voltage into your batteries so that it kind of boils and mixes up the electrolyte in order to get some of the, to avoid stratification in your electrolyte. Insurance, I already said count as annual operating expense. Generator replacement. Oh, hey, this is important. You probably want to buy an extra panel. Okay, so let's say you're putting in 10 panels. I would buy 11. Okay, because what if one of your panels is, I don't know, hit by your neighbor with a baseball? You never know. Okay, so instead of your system being down, you can just take one panel, put it up there, and then send the other broken panel in for repair, or send it off to get another one. Okay, because shipping is going to be less if you buy it all at once and have that extra panel instead of having to pay for one later. Okay. All right. So let's keep going. All right. Let's talk about incentives. So you have a federal incentive, which basically is it's from the federal government, and it's a tax credit. So when you purchase your system and you have your initial cost, okay, for all your materials and whatnot, you're going to get in your tax return the next year 30%, not a third, 30% back on the total cost. Okay. So this is a tax credit versus a tax deduction. So a deduction on your taxes reduces income by deducting the amount, and therefore you pay less tax. Okay. So you're deducting that amount that you paid from your income. All right. But a credit, you're actually getting just the straight 30% back. So you get more back that way. So the credit is better in our case. Okay? So I'm just kind of scrolling through here. Net metering, we already talked about that. So if you want to calculate for you off-grid people, just the avoidance of cost of your power. Now, you don't get it back in the winter. You don't have that bank like the power company. But let's say you want to know what your offset is going to be. So you could take your your month of lowest production. Okay, let's say January or December. Figure out what your production is for that month. Okay, so let's say you have, well, we can just use this. I'm sorry. Let me just use what we've got here. So you got 10 cents per kilowatt hour that you're paying for electricity if you're tied to the grid, okay? And then you have this system that produces 2,000 kilowatt hours, okay? So you're going to save $200 on your bill, save $200, okay, by not having to pay the power company, okay? So, and I'll show you a little bit better later. Production incentives. Okay, production incentives. This is a big deal. So Washington used to have, so these notes are a little old, so that's why they're not exactly correct or up to date. Because Washington used to have a production incentive, okay? And that production incentive actually increased if you used made in Washington products. Okay, so it went from 10 cents a kilowatt hour you got paid as a PV producer. If you bought made in Washington, and it went all the way up to 34 cents a kilowatt hour, which made a huge difference. Okay, but that does not exist anymore, and it actually expired within the last couple of years. Okay, and the reason is that generally this is a fairly expensive incentive program for the government to run, and it's just it's happened in Germany, it's happening here. They're just cutting back on these kinds of incentives. So this is the old one. This is kind of an example of the old rate structure, okay, for Puget Sound Energy. So if you had solar modules and inverters both made in Washington, oh man, that's actually more than I thought. 50 cents on the dollar you would be paid, all right, per kilowatt hour, okay? And if you just had like a regular old solar inverter, no. Any other PV system, okay, so just generic PV system, 14 cents. It's a huge difference, and the idea was not only are you getting paid, the person who's installing it, or the owner who's getting it installed gets paid a certain amount, but then they're also incentivizing these local solar companies that are making these modules and inverters. So that was the idea. But they don't do that anymore. So sad deal for our purposes, because I like to see money that we're getting back on our systems. But that's not as typical anymore. So one of the reasons that I gave you Crown Point, Indiana, is because there actually is a incentive program there. Okay, so I wanted you to compare a non-incentive state to a place where they had incentives still. So you will have to do your own research into that and what type of incentives there are. But it should look something like you're getting a certain number of cents per kilowatt hour. Okay, and it only is true for a certain capacity of solar installation. So you want to make sure that you get all the information about that. So that's for you guys to kind of do a little research on. Okay. I don't think we need to talk about all this stuff. All right, that's the end of that. Okay, so now let's actually take a look at what I'm talking about. So let's do off-grid first. So I'm going to post this this sheet. Okay, this is a sheet that basically will let the off-grid people figure out their NPV and compare their two situations. Okay, so the way you use this is, here's your discount rate. Okay, you can change that, but I think I said it's supposed to be 8%. All right, these are your years. Period would mean all the years. Okay, so this goes all the way to 25 years, 25-year analysis. Okay, this is your NPV. So right now you can see it's negative. All right, so off-grid, you should be negative anyway, probably. So let's see. You've got a few columns for income and expenses. So let's say you have a 2,000 watt array. It's producing, it's 2,000 watt per capacity, and then you have 365 days in the year. Days per year. Days per year. And then let's say you would be paying, if you were tied to the grid, I think it's about 13 cents. Oops, put that down here. 13 cents. 13 cents. Here we go. Cents per kilowatt hour. Okay, so if we multiply all this together, this times this times this. Wait. Oh, I know why. I need to work on my math a little bit. 365 days a year. I did this on the calculator and not in here. Let's see here. And then you have 24 hours in a day. Okay, and this is in kilowatts, so you're also going to need to, so it goes like 2,000 watts times, I'm doing this live, you guys, so bear with me. So we're looking for watt hours. So times this many hours times this many days times that's how many dollars, no cents, divided by 1,000. Boom. Yes. All right. So you're looking at about $2,277.6 of like cost avoidance. Okay, so we can count that as income. So if I put that in here, so 2277.6. All right, and I'm going to copy it all the way down. 25. But you know what? You know what? It's going to go down. Oops. Escape. It's going to go down because there is a bit of a deterioration in the efficiency of the panels. So this, every year it's going to go down. Production is going to go down about 1%. So we can just do this. We can say equals 0.99 times the previous one. All right, and it's just going to decrease and decrease and decrease. Okay. There we go. All right, so that's about right. All right, cool. All right, so there's our kind of our cost avoidance by being off the grid. Okay, and then here's our initial installation cost. Okay, so that's pretty high. Let's do like $20,000. Oh, notice I forgot to put the negative sign, so 48,000 is like way too high. Negative 20,000. And this is going to be there we go. Oops. There we go. All right, so we got 1,000 watt. I changed it to 1,000. Okay, so because I don't have all my numbers quite worked out here, you're going to get better numbers than I am because I'm just kind of guessing here. So 1,000 watts. Okay, and then you have your cost avoidance. So this is your initial installation cost. This is the return, the federal tax credit. So it's 30% back. Okay, so this is income, but it only happens once. All right, and then this would be something like any kind of maintenance or fuel cost. You can just have a reoccurring negative number year over year. Okay, and then this would be, let's see, this would be something like, let's see, 7 years. You're probably going to replace your battery bank. So let's say that's like a $3,000 cost there. And let's say you're going to replace your inverter at year 10. That's going to be $1,000, negative $1,000. Okay. So, NPV, negative number. You should be seeing a negative number. Okay. So that's how you would fill out a sheet like this, and then I'm going to bump this up really quick just to show you let's see. I'm gonna let's say we're doing like 5,000 watts here, and I'm not gonna change anything else. I just wanted to turn this MPV into a positive because I wanted to go over. Oh, that's too much. There we go. No, no, no. I'm talking to myself. Okay. So once you start to see, so we come over here. Once your payback starts to be positive, that's when you've paid off the system. Okay, so come down here. Okay. All right. So that's how that works. Okay, so this is how you do it if you do your off-grid. Okay, so let's do grid tied really quick. So you should have two spreadsheets, or you can have so you could have a spreadsheet here, spreadsheet here. You can just copy it over and have two different situations, or you could have two different workbooks completely. I don't care. That's fine. Just label things for me. Okay, so then for you grid tied people, so you're going to, so I have a SAM file here. So my location, I'll do Crown Point, Indiana. Okay, and so I chose it here, and then I have my module I've chosen. I have my inverter system. Excuse me, system design. We already walked through this. Now shading. Somebody asked me how you input shading. So how you do that is you go to edit shading right here in this. So you go shading and layout, go to edit shading, and you click on enable month by hour beam irradiance shading loss, and you see all these little zeros. Okay, so it says 0% no shading, 100% fully shaded. So you're gonna go look at that Solar Pathfinder photo, and if an hour is 100% shaded, you're gonna put 100 in that hour. And you're going to put 100 in that. Oh, that's 1,000. Oops. If it's 50% shaded, you can say 50. Okay, and so you're going to fill this whole thing out, and then you're going to go OK. All right, and then that shading is inputted in there. Losses. DC wiring, you're going to put your target wiring that you figured out. Wiring loss, okay? So whatever you decided to do, it was 1 to 3%. Then you have your AC wiring, so put your target loss in there. Okay, so there's that time lifetime. Degradation rate, it's probably about 0.5 to 1% a year. So you can check your panel specs. They may have something like this on there. And change it if it makes sense to you. Battery storage, you don't have batteries. System cost. You want to make sure if you're going to do, so I want an Excel sheet of your costs broken down. I don't just want this. I want to actually see what you purchased and how much each thing was. Okay, so after you do that, then you'll put that information in here. So instead of doing dollars per watt DC, change it to dollars per unit. And I just threw some numbers in here. So $300 a panel might be a little pricey. So I have that's how much per panel, and I have 13 units, so it does the math for me. And I have $3,900 there for the panels. Then I have one inverter. I have it in dollars per unit, $2,000 for that inverter. Then it basically totals everything up for you. We don't have a battery at all, so that's fine. 0 for the battery. Get rid of these. So you can see, so you can see all the different cost right here and just do the dollar amount. So balance of system equipment is any equipment that is not a module and not an inverter. Okay? So that would be your combiner box. That'd be your breakers. That's your wiring. That's anything you're putting into the system as far as equipment that is not the module and inverter. Then you have your installation labor cost. You can come up with a good number for that. Installer margin and overhead. Okay. You may want some contingency on that. You're going to put your permitting in here. So, not in here. Sorry. Zero these things out. Put your permitting costs here where it just says dollars. Okay. Don't need an engineer. Grid interconnection. Remember, I put $400 there. This stuff we don't need really to worry about. Tax rate. Where's the tax rate? Good question. Good question. Taxes. Oh, I know it's somewhere. Taxes. Maybe it's in another one. Okay, because we don't have 5%. You gotta check the Indiana state tax. Okay. Okay. And then you're gonna have a standard loan. Okay. You're going to borrow it all, meaning your debt fraction is 100%. Your loan term will have it 25 years. Loan rate was 8%. Discount rate is 8%. You can leave the inflation rate, that's fine. Analysis period 25 years. Federal income tax, you can just leave that. And then Washington doesn't have an income tax, so you can put 0 if you're in Washington. You're going to have to check the state income tax rate for the states that you're in. Okay, and then sales tax, here it is. Change the sales tax to whichever state you're in as well. Okay. Incentives. So I don't have, so none, this is all going to be, let's see. So here's your 30% back right here for federal. They already put that in there. So cool. And then down here, so all the rest of it's pretty much blank except for production-based incentives. So if you're in the Indiana one, you're going to have a state incentive, which is going to be a certain dollars per kilowatt. You're going to have to figure that out. But I'm going to put it as 0 right now. So let's pretend we don't have any production-based incentives, meaning paid per kilowatt hour. Okay. Electricity rates, you're going to import your electricity rate. So you can search for rates, which is what I did. And you're going to put your zip code in for where you're at. Man, I don't remember where I'm at. Let me... Crown Point, Indiana zip code 46307. Okay. 46307. Search by zip code. Okay, this is your service provider. Okay, and then you're going to show active only, meaning you're showing only active rates. And here's your rate right here. Okay, and then you can just go download and apply utility rate. I've already done this, so I'm not going to do it again because it's already in there. Okay, and then you can just ignore electric load. That's fine, whatever. Don't care. Oh, I know. I think I screwed up on my inverter sizing. Oops. Okay, so without the incentive, here's your information. Notice here's your net present value right here. That's something you're going to need to look at, okay? So for you people doing grid tied, here's your net present value. This is the number you're going to be focusing on. Okay, if it's negative, it's not a good return on your investment. So let's go back to incentives. I'm going to throw in an incentive here, see if it makes any difference. State. I'm going to go 13 cents per kilowatt hour. And then I'm going to simulate this again. Yeah, I know. Oh, it didn't make much of a difference. Well, that's a shame. let's see here. Dollars. Use Sam doesn't apply inflation to the yeah, I know. Okay. Copy. This takes forever. I wonder if I can like highlight all of them. Nope. That's too bad. It's 25 years. We'll call it good. Okay. Okay. Terms. Oh, that's why it didn't make a difference. Ha! 25 years. There we go. That'll do it. Yeah, there you go. Net present value. You can see now you're at 3,000. Okay, so now you're getting a return on your investment. So you can see that having a incentive for production does make a big difference on whether or not you're going to want to install this type of system. Okay, so I think that that's pretty much it. And if you have any questions, let me know. Okay, good luck.